Okay, so we're going to continue our study or our investigation into area of study 1, Australian Indigenous culture. We're now looking at ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. The study design uses a word there, distinction. If that shows up in any exam or SAT question, just remember half the marks will go to those kind of keywords in VCE humanities. We're talking about sociology, business management, legal studies, okay, those kind of subjects. If they ask you for the distinction, they really want you to talk about the difference for at least half the answer. They don't want to see a bunch of definitions, you know what I mean, and examples. They want you to talk about the actual difference. That's what they want to see, okay? So remember that keywords mean something in VCE humanities. If they say compare, make sure you compare for at least half the answer. If they say distinction, which is difference, make sure there's a lot of discussion about the difference for half the answer, okay? Has anyone ever visited another country? This is something we discussed in class. How did you find it? Can you give examples of how the country may be different from Australia? I think somebody gave examples of some other countries where the greetings were different, where there was maybe a different kind of culture they came across, okay? I don't think anybody described that any other culture as strange, although some people said that they were maybe not used to it, but there was nothing described as strange, okay? But basically I'm sort of leaning or referring to ethnocentrism. As soon as you describe something that's different to your own culture as strange, you're automatically being ethnocentric. That's why I put that question there. Another example is, has anyone ever felt like they're marginalized due to their cultural differences? I think we discussed the hijab, for example. Some people feel like they're treated differently because of the hijab. Okay, maybe skin color might be another example where some people feel like they're treated differently because of their skin color, okay? Or any other cultural practice, okay? That might be ethnocentrism. This is connected to ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, which we're going to define in a sec. Okay, so this is the theorist. His name is Graham Sumner. This is not essential. You don't need to know his name if you don't have the, stamina to learn all these different names. There are some names that are essential that you must know, such as C. Wright Mills for the sociological imagination. But this one here, you don't have to know it, okay? This is just something that just enhances your response. The only reason I talk about enhancing your response is because VCE Year 12 is really a competition, okay? When an examiner marks your exam, it's a comparative thing. It's about how much better your answer is than everybody else. When you have Graham Sumner in there, when you have a quote from Graham Sumner, it's better than somebody who just has a definition and an example. If you have a sourced example that has a quote and a source from an article or something, it's just better than somebody else's answer. And that's what VCE Year 12, especially VCE Year 12 humanities, business, legal, sociology, global politics, these subjects, that's what it's all about, okay? It's about winning. And the quote that you can use any part of this quote in your response. Ethnocentrism is a type of thinking that involves an individual viewing and judging things using one's own group as a standard. All others are ranked and rated with reference to it. So what I would use if I was in your shoes would be just this just the last two sentences, okay? All others are ranked with reference to it, in brackets, using the quotation marks, and then in brackets I'll write Graham Sumner. Okay, that's what I would do. It's a little background of Graham Sumner. We don't need to know this, so I'm going to just go ahead and skip it, okay? But just one thing that you can talk about is the in-group and the out-group, okay? Ethnocentrism is like, they're different to me, therefore they're inferior, or they're scary, or I'm scared of their culture, whatever. Anything that's different, that is inferior, or I'm scared of it, it's ethnocentric. Or it's strange, I find it weird, it's ethnocentric thinking. Cultural relativism is the opposite of ethnocentric, but don't write that in any kind of SAC or exam response. That's not going to get you any marks, okay? Cultural relativism is to look at a culture and to judge the culture using its own standards. In order to do that, you have to use the sociological imagination. You have to learn a bit about that culture. You look at her behavior, she's wearing a hijab. If I'm ethnocentric, I'm just going to say, look at these weird people with their head coverings. Why on earth would you put a cloth over your head? Okay, that's ethnocentric. If you use your sociological imagination, you study it, you find out about how the religion, says that you're supposed to wear it. You find out about how other Muslim people wear it. That's culturally relative. Now you judge it according to your own standards. You say, okay, you're a Muslim. Muslims wear hijabs. Therefore, it's culturally relative. It's normal for them. Do you understand? That's culturally relative, okay? It's different from ethnocentrism. The guy's name is Franz Boas, okay? So you can use the name Franz Boas to enhance your response, and you can take a bit of some kind of quote from here, okay, and add it to your response, just to enhance it. Background of him, we don't need to know much about him, but just this phrase here maybe, walk a mile in his shoes, or walk a mile in their shoes before passing judgment. Interpret this image as ethnocentrically or culturally relatively. Well, ethnocentric would be, look at these weird people, they don't shake women's hands, do they think that men are better than women, etc. That's ethnocentric. Culturally relative is to know about Islam, know about the religion. You know, you say, okay, these people, they believe in, you know, segregation, which is to separate the genders, and women shouldn't be shaking the hand of men, okay? So that's culturally relative, knowing a bit about them and not judging them as an outsider. Okay, so to judge this one, again, this example here, ethnocentrically, you would say, oh my gosh, they're putting a cloth on their heads, you know, look at the paint, what's this about, something negative, okay? Culturally relative would be to learn about the culture a little bit, use your sociological imagination, look at the personal decision to wear a cloth and connect it with society and their culture, and understand that it's normal for their culture, it's normal for them, it's part of their culture, they have to wear this, they have to grow their hair, and for that reason, it's considered normal in their culture, even though it's not normal in my culture. Therefore, it's culturally relative because I'm not going to judge it and say how weird, how weird. I'm going to say how normal. Another example is this one, where in the Emirates, the UAE, people greet each other by touching noses, okay? Culture, ethnocentric would be to say something negative about that and say how strange, etc. A culturally relative would be to learn about their culture and learn about how they have a whole communication in this greeting. You know, they touch one quickly, that's like if someone you're not fond with, you're not familiar with. If they touch it 3 times, that's like someone you're very close with and you know them very well. There's a whole system of communication. That's culturally relative, to learn about it. Again, culturally relative here is to learn about the paintings and what the paintings mean, learn about the instruments that they're using, like the didgeridoo, the weapons that they're using, the boomerang that they might be holding, okay, these kind of things, that's culturally relative. Ethnocentric is to look at them and say, look at the painting, how weird, how backward, etc. Okay. Same thing here. You look at the painting and you say, how weird. Look at the stick. What is he going to do with that stick? It's a stick. You know, why doesn't he use a gun? Okay, that's ethnocentric. Culturally relative is to learn about their culture, to appreciate it. Okay. We did this in class where I gave you some kind of like. I gave you some stuff to read, like quotes and stuff like that, and then we analyzed, we applied it to some images. If you do want to do this activity, the quotes are up, or the activity is up on Google Drive. You can download it from there, and then you can go through the images and read it and see yourself and identify which quote is ethnocentric and which quote is culturally relative. Can you define ethnocentric thinking? Can you define culturally relative thinking? Can you provide examples of this? That's higher level. You got to give me a random example, okay? For example, a non-Indigenous culture example would be the hijab. But because in this area of study, you have to use Indigenous culture as your example. An example could be, you know, the painting. You could talk about that from both sides, culturally relative and ethnocentric. It was 2016 exam in the booklet. It's on page 7 of that booklet, part A booklet. You can sit that as well.